Hi, Mike Kennedy with you, and we're looking at a Polaroid camera. Why we're looking at this particular model, this Sun Autofocus 600, is there is film being made for it again. Pretty good film. But first I thought we'd go through a little bit of the history of Polaroid and the type of films it had. And I'm going to, unfortunately I can't show you examples of these right now, certainly not the roll film. Maybe I can find a pack film later to show, and we'll do a video on those. But I wrote some typical model numbers down for the three generations of what has been Polaroid film. They started with a roll film, the actual paper roll that had chemical pods. All of the films involved some type of rollers that compress the chemical pod and cause the film to develop. These two first ones, you had to peel the paper off the negative. Okay. Later on, they developed what we'd call the integral film, which is film that popped out complete and you didn't have to peel anything off of it at all. If I could kind of draw a rough diagram here of the roll paper actually was this fairly big roll that you would expose, and then there were rollers and chemicals that would go on this, and when you get done you'd open up the back of the camera and there would be this piece of paper, the thing, and you would pull it off and you'd have a print. Now usually with this system you would have another vial of chemicals that you would have to put onto that afterwards. You'd spread it on to fix that print and make it barely permanent. Now since I'm an old guy, I got to experiment with all these types of film, and this film I really liked. The black and white Polaroid roll film, which hasn't been made forever, produced a really slightly grainy but really nice print. And I'm going to try to find some prints that I did, see if I can still find some around. It was a very high SA product, so like I say, there was some grain to it, but it was very sharp and produced really nice prints. Then we went to the pack film, where they integrated all of those into a cartridge, similar but not exactly like this. This is a different one. I don't have an example of this to show you right now, but I will when I'm going to pick out. I'm doing this kind of backwards. I'm going to do the Sun Polaroid 600 camera first, and then we're going to go back and look at some of the other models. Okay, so the pack film was different in that everything was contained in this square rectangular pack, and if you looked at it before you put it in, it looked kind of like this, and this would be the actual area that would get exposed. The print size I think was about 3¼ by 4¼ but you would drop this in, and again in the camera there was a series of rollers. You would expose it, then pull it through, and what would happen is that would start the developing process. Eventually you would open the camera up, and again you would pull the print off the negative, and the black and white still had that little chemicals. Now this is the color came out in this, and the pack film created kind of an explosion. This was, I would say, Polaroid's highest point of diversity. They had black and white films, different speeds. They had different color films, different kinds of contrast for color films that were made just for passport photographs, different, quite a range of different things. one of the products they had that I really, really liked was they had an integral system where when you did this, not only did you end up with your positive print, you actually ended up with a negative, a large negative. Now that negative had to be processed a little more, had to be put in I believe a solution of sodium sulfate for a while, but you ended up with this large format negative, which was really nice. Well, large format was bigger than 120, but smaller than 4x5. So we had a whole range of different films, and this was, I would say, one of the heyday of Polaroid. Back here, we have no digital products at all, so if you needed a print and you needed it quickly, this was the way to go. You were a real estate agent, you needed a picture of a house, you needed a picture for a passport, you needed it quickly, anything you needed. And if you needed a print that was quick, you did it with this pack film system. And this was so convenient that a lot of the larger professional cameras made backs that would hold this type of film. And what you would do is put that back onto your camera, and you could do a test shot with that to get your exposure right. Look at the print and say, this is what, you're looking at the print and saying, yeah, this is what I want. And then you would put your film back on and shoot your film. Because a lot of times you were working with color transparency film, especially if you were shooting for clients. For reproduction, color transparencies or slides were the way to go. And the exposure was very finicky. And it really helped to have a Polaroid print to use as a guide to visualize what the exposure and the final results would be. The only danger with that is sometimes people would like the Polaroid print better than they liked the slide film, the final version. That didn't happen that often, but it did happen. So, typical of this, we had the models 100, 200, 400, and then they all went up from, they had the different model numbers, like the 400, the 450, the 100, the 150, and different numbers in between. And that all was based on the different accessories and how much the quality of the camera. Some of these cameras had plastic lenses, which were okay, but some of them had glass lenses, which were really outstanding. And again, with this system, you get extremely sharp prints, especially if you use the lower speed material. Like I say, the positive negative one, where you got the actual -2, was really something. Okay, now we're moving forward to actually the period of integral film. And what do we mean by integral? Well, here's the actual pack that was produced. And Polaroid, in its wisdom, decided that each one should have its own battery. So this is actually a battery pod in here. Okay, and this film would rest in here like this. It would go into the camera. If I press the right button here, this pack would go into the camera. This pack is long since worn out and died. And you would close it. My goodness, still get some battery life left to it. And what would happen is you would take a picture. This knows there's no film in that pack, but you would take a picture and it would spit out a film. Now these are some old sheets that have been in this pack forever, but if I turn it over, you can see there's 3 distinct chemical pods. So again, as with all the Polaroid film, we can do this correctly again. You'll see that there's a series of rollers here, and the film would actually transport through those rollers, and that chemical would be squeezed onto the film, and then it would develop. And this would actually pop out the front of the camera. That's amazing how many people probably today haven't seen that. Now, At the time, I don't think Polaroid had any black and white products for this, just color, which made sense because color is what's more popular, what people wanted. Now, because of the many layers here, this didn't tend to produce as sharp a print, okay, as the black and white. But the interesting thing about this camera now is that film is now being manufactured that will fit and work in this camera. And just to give you a little history of Polaroid, I guess. Okay, Polaroid was very successful for a long time. And then it did some poor investment, including the Polavision, which was supposed to be an instant movie film. That hurt it financially. And then just the fact that the cost per print was so expensive that reduced its saleability. And of course, eventually, what comes across is digital. And of course, digital basically ends up killing the needs for all of it. Well, what happened a while ago, this company called Impossible Project Film decided to reverse engineer and try to make film for this camera without violating any of Polaroid products, which they actually did. Although the film was kind of nominal. Here's the little critic that was making all of the noise. So I picked him up so I could finish the video. So this company, Impossible Film Project, started making film that worked in these cameras, but they sold it kind of as an art film because originally it kind of didn't work that well and came out different colors, different contrasts, and of course as they continued to work, it continued to get better and better. Well, then one of the major stockholders of the Impossible Project film actually bought Polaroid, what was left of Polaroid, in other words, the name and all the intellectual property rights. So they acquired all the formulas, all the patents, and what happened was they've come out with a remarkably better film and a new Polaroid camera. What Impossible Project did was they've got a camera similar to this. This one is interesting in that I'll just mention this here. See this large thing here? This is an ultrasonic transducer. This actually uses sound or sonar to focus itself. And it's interesting, these people would disassemble these cameras to get this out of it for different like robot projects and things. And eventually they started selling these sensors separately, the units separately, because they became so popular. So Impossible Project has now manufactured film that's much better, much higher quality, different color black and white films. And they decided, which makes some sense, not only are they making film that will directly fit in this, it has the battery pack. And of course, there's more shots and it's more expensive than the Polaroid product. But of course, you got to understand they're not working at the high volume that Polaroid was. But they decided to take the battery out of it and put the battery in the new camera. So they have a new camera now that works with the film that doesn't have a battery. That way, they've cut the cost of including that battery in every shot, which to me makes a lot of sense. So there's just a little history of Polaroid, but this Sun Autofocus 660 model now can be used again and with good results because of the new film by, now technically they're Polaroid again because they own the brand name and everything, so they can call themselves Polaroid and not the Impossible Mission Project. And from what I've seen, it's a very good product. So we'll look in some of our other videos. We'll look a little more about Polaroid, and we'll look at some of these older cameras and describe them as well.